and welcome to the I Am a Man Black Men's Town Hall. We are so happy at the National Urban League Young Professionals that you have chosen to join us tonight to have a very in-depth conversation with the men of our National Urban Young Professionals Board. We are excited sharing with you the experiences, what it has taken for them to achieve professionally, some of the concerns that they have about what's happening in our country today, in light of some of the things that are happening with African American men. And so this is going to be hopefully an engaging and an enlightening conversation, at times a sober conversation, fantastic men on our board that I'd like to introduce to you, and we're going to go ahead and move right into the conversation. So the first person on our national.
All right, so I'm going to pick up. We're going to go from, let's say, left to right. So the first person we'd like to introduce is Mr. Hakeemu Davidson. Next,
Good evening, everybody. Hakeemu Davidson, National Membership Chair, former president of the Washington, D.C. chapter known as the Greater Washington Urban League Thursday Network. Definitely looking forward to this conversation with all of you.
Okay. Next, we have Mr. Carlos Clanton. Mr. Clanton.
Just logged back on, so I'm not quite sure what you asked.
You're just introducing yourself, sir.
Just introducing ourselves. All right. Well, Carlos Clanton, I'm current National Policies and Procedures Chair for the National Urban League Young Professionals. I'm former 3-year chapter president from the Hampton Roads chapter here.
Okay. Next, we have Mr. William Barnes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm the National Advocacy Chair, two-term chapter president, two-term treasurer. We're going to have a real conversation tonight.
Next, we have Mr. Travis Townsend.
Good evening, everyone. Travis Townsend, the Programs Chair for the National Urban League Young Professionals, also former president of the Urban League of Greater Atlanta. I'm excited to discuss these critical issues with my brethren here tonight.
Next, we have Mr. Joseph Randolph. We have Joseph Randolph, who is our Southern Region Vice President. He may be having some audio issues. We can't really hear him.
He also serves as manager for Vanguard.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. Elijah Williams.
Hey, good night, everyone. Elijah Williams, the National Treasurer for the National Urban League Young Professional, former Community Outreach Chair, and former president of the Houston Area Urban League Young Professionals.
And I guess last but not least is me, Mr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson. I am the Information Technology Chair, and I am the owner of John Rich Media.
And we're responsible for everything that happened this evening.
So thanks all of you for joining. We'll get right into this discussion about race, professional advancement, and police misconduct. The first question is, in your words, what is it like to be a black man in America? And we will start with our Information Technology Chair, Jeremy Johnson.
Okay, so I just have really one word, and that word is awesome. And the reason I say that is because, yes, being a black man in America has its challenges in life. People like to stereotype us. People like to say, a lot of different things about us. The media portrays us in a certain fashion. Internationally, we're probably seen as a blight on America. But the thing about it is, we come from a proud heritage. We were the group of individuals who were brought over here, who were, strong enough to make this country what it was. And the biggest thing is, what I like about being a black man is, when I walk in the door, oftentimes people don't know what to think. They think I'm one way, and that's cool, because they think that, and I open my mouth, they get to see who I am. My color goes out the window, and then usually I'm able to get what I want regarding business. So like I said, my one statement, my one word is awesome. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay. Elijah Williams, what's your statement for being a black man here in America?
Sure. I got a lot of similar thoughts as Jeremy. I mean, I think I would, call it a awesome struggle. In terms of, a lot of pride, I think, wrapped up in terms of being, African American man in this country. I personally like the unknown. I think that comes with being a black man. Um, I think there's so many stereotypes that, for whatever reason, may be true or untrue, but I think it's an awesome struggle and a beautiful thing, especially to be a black man who's trying to, do some good, in the world. I think it's a great, contribution to society and a great opportunity to be an example, to our community, in terms of the African American community, as well as be an example for what a black man should be and can be in the world in general.
Great. What is your response to that question?
Who did she call? Did she call me?
Yeah,
William, did you have a response to the question?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think in one word, what everybody basically has said is absolutely correct. We are proud of our heritage. I think that I wouldn't have it any other way as well. I have a little bit of a somber experience early on. So what is it like when you really get down to the question is, I transferred from an all mainly white county school to be with my peers. So I started in elementary school and all the way through middle school going to a predominantly white school. And I'll tell a really quick story. My mother was okay with me moving from a county school to an inner city, basically all school. She was nervous at first until she heard me standing out on my front porch one day, and I was plotting with some of my buddies and my friends that we were going to go up the next day and handle business with some of the white kids that had called us niggas. And that was real talk. My mom became very fearful. We were talking about packing knives, and had just gotten fed up, and we were bad. We were going to just go, do some things to some people, not knowing the danger. And that was, I was in the 8th grade at the time. So I got to experience, I don't want to compare my experience to what our ancestors have, but I certainly, early on in my life, experienced what it was to be called a nigger, experienced what it was to be basically face racism. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I did get with my people, and I saw the pride. I was, beginning to see what was happening in our communities, and I loved it.
all right. I guess I'm going to pick up here. Mr. Davidson, what's your opinion on being an African American man in America?
For me, I think if we were going to describe it in one word, I would use the word stressful. I think there are, as we all know, there are a lot of different burdens, a lot of different things that we deal with as black men. I think one of the gentlemen earlier mentioned the stereotypes that we have on a regular basis that we're labeled with. Jeremy, you talked about surprising people when they actually get to know you and different things like that. But it's stressful. It's one thing to be able to be an individual and to kind of represent yourself, but as an educated black man in America, there's always this thing in the air. There's always this the fact that you're representing something more than yourself, and sometimes you shouldn't have to deal with it. Do I tip more at this restaurant because they think black people don't tip and they're not going to give us good service? Do I worry about if this cop is going to give me fair treatment when he pulls me over for this traffic ticket? I mean, it's kind of stressful. It's definitely not something I would want to change. If I had a choice before I came into the womb, I was black man all the way. I love being a black man, but it's definitely a stressful thing in America. Um, we are not appreciated for the contributions we make to our society. We even have, even within our race, it's just we have an interesting dynamic with our sisters that needs to improve leaps and bounds. So there's a lot going on, but I mean, as some of the gentlemen mentioned, there's a lot of positives to it as well. But it's absolutely stressful on a day-to-day basis being a black man in this country.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Randolph?
Those types of, with those is, can you talk about why it is that some used to seek help in dealing with those challenges?
Who did you want to answer that question?
Carlos. Okay, Travis.
I think he's left.
I think my response to that question is actually connected to what my thoughts on what it is like to be a black man. Being a black man, you have to be dynamic. I mean, you're situated in a precarious manner in sort of everywhere you are, right? So, people have certain expectations of you. Some people in the community expect you to be tough and hard. Then some folks need you to be a role model. If you're actually successful, they want you to take care of everybody, and they need you to be strong. Your sisters are going to look at you to be strong. Your potential mates or your mates want you to be strong. And then you beat everybody is looking at you and either as a threat, as a challenger, even amongst other African American males. So, the reason why we tend to not ask for help, at least in my opinion, is that it will be sometimes seen as a weakness, right? And then you feel like you're not giving folks the other things that they need from you, that strength, that courage, that sense of stability. Right now there's always talk about how few good black men there are, right? So if you think or fancy yourself as a good black man, what you want to do is be what people need you to be. And one of the last things you need them to be, you think they need you to be, is weak or perceived as weak. So I think there's a lot going on that prevents African American males, black males, from getting help.
Joe, in your opinion, what do you to be the largest 2 or 3 obstacles that black men must be trying to live lives for themselves?
Randy, can you repeat that middle part? It cut in and out on me.
I can repeat it for what
black men need to overcome in order to create opportunities for themselves.
I think 1 or 2 things in terms of just being able to create opportunities to overcome. I think one is just being self-aware and being self-assured. I think a lot of times what I've seen some black men, particularly myself, early, especially in career or in general, just making sure that what you do and how you prepare is good enough. Sometimes I think Travis mentioned sometimes we don't feel like we're ever doing enough, and I think sometimes being able to understand that what you do and how you prepare is enough for you to overcome any obstacles, but then also being able to be open to change and being open to differences as well. I think sometimes we fall victim of not being open or not being willing to have the conversation or the dialogue, whether it's with other men or whether it's with our females, is being able to open ourselves up, because I think ultimately that'll allow us to be a lot more comfortable in our feelings, a lot more comfortable in our settings, a lot more comfortable in being who we are. And I think those are 2 of the obstacles that I've been able to observe, not only with myself, but also with other black men or young black men that I've encountered.
Okay, Mr. Clanton, since you're back on the call, the question that was just asked is, what do you believe are the largest 2 or 3 obstacles black men must overcome when trying to create productive lives for themselves?
Um, well, I apologize if I restate something because I didn't hear what was being stated before. But I would probably say, first of all, being stereotyped. Second one is overcoming past poor decisions. Whether or not you've been incarcerated and you now have a felony or something else that's typically, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's very difficult. You don't serve your time, and that those things go away. They're actually there with you until the governor of our state actually can relieve you of having a felony on your record. And the last thing would probably be regaining a sense of hope for your future. When you see high levels of unemployment, when as far as not really role models or people reaching out to you in your particular neighborhood or where you are, sometimes it just kind of seems like that, as they would say, the way of the hood or wherever you are, that's all you kind of see and what you can obtain. So being able to regain some sense of hope that you can actually be more than just what's around you in your neighborhood.
Okay. Great. So we're going to do one more question from this group about the community, and I'm sure a lot of our fellow members out there would love to hear this question and hear our responses. So the question is, Black women seem to do a very good job at uplifting and supporting each other. What can Black men do to better support each other in our interactions and in our community? So let's start with Mr. Davidson.
I actually think that Black men do a pretty good job of supporting each other, to be honest with you. Especially, when you look at the interaction that when you see gentlemen who are together, typically there is some positive support. We don't really get a lot of credit for it. It's not necessarily spoken a lot of outside of our circles. If I was going to answer the question directly of things we could do better, we certainly need to hold ourselves accountable more for our actions in regards to everything. The friends that I've had since freshman year of college, we do that for each other. If there's a lot of support, a lot of love there, but if somebody's slacking off or making bad decisions, if it comes to career decisions they're making that are poor, they're not picking up the slack there. Bad decisions involving women, which gets a lot of Black men caught up on a regular basis, as we all know. The treatment of women, especially, that needs to improve. Definitely holding ourselves accountable and really having these conversations with each other more, I think, would be something we could do. But I actually think that Black men support each other more than we're giving credit for on a regular basis. But,
okay.
It's different, though. It's a different type of support.
Okay, Mr. Barnes, how about you? What's your take on this? You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
I take a totally different approach to it, Jeremy. I think our Black women take care of one another much better than Black men do for each other. And it's a cultural thing. It's like, I want to handle my business. My dad raised me. Your dad raised you. We have a lot of unsaid things that we say to one another that just kind of is telegraphed or telepathed, but we don't have that emotional foundation. I think Travis was talking about earlier, one of the gentlemen were talking about the fact that, we don't really just get with one another and have those real talk conversations when it comes to emotional support, because we're all hard, right? So we got to be hard for our significant others. We got to be hard for the family. Got to be hard for mom. Got to be hard for sister. Got to be hard for little brother. So we don't really, in my opinion, get into the emotional support that I think is necessary and have those conversations on that level. And it's just because, it was a conversation about how, we go to conferences and how women can double up in the bed, but men wouldn't dare do that. And I certainly wouldn't dare do it. But it's a societal thing that basically I think that we deal with the fact that we don't get into each other's business in regards to that. I think when we communicate, it's more on a surface level. It's more about sport. We may talk about a few family things. We may talk about, about law, my girlfriend or whatever the case may be, and get some advice. But even that's still surface, because we're not going to tell how we really feel about that girl to our boy. You know, we gonna say a few things and then have a beer and then it's on to the next thing. And so then we're left to deal with that emotional, those emotional things and demons to deal with ourselves. So I don't know if there's a fix for it, because personally I don't necessarily want another dude in my personal space, but I do think it's a difference in how women interact versus men interact.
Okay, Elijah, what's your take on that? And then we're gonna move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I think well said. I mean, if I had to summarize it, it would probably be a good summary of all that. I mean, to me, it's really love. I think we have to do a better job of supporting each other, holding each other accountable for things that we do wrong, congratulating each other and being there for each other when we do things right. I mean, I agree with what William said, but I also think we do, in general, do a fairly decent job of having that type of support system, or at least kind of what I've seen. But I've also seen, the manly, kind of thing where we're kind of standoffish, and don't have that emotional take. So, quite simply I put, I think it's love one another. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a man crying, a man being there for his good friend, in a purely man love kind of way. So I think we need to do more of that.
Cool. I would agree with all of those points, and they were really great. So what we're going to do next is we're going to move on to the subject of race. And so, first question that we are going to address is, how do we take, as African American men, how do we take claim of the identity of African Americans and stop letting the media negatively define us? I have a feeling that Travis may really want to answer this question.
Well, I'll say this. It is a difficult challenge, right? Because everybody would like to control the media narrative for every situation, whether it be, the brand of your product or service, whatever you're doing. It's difficult. And folks with an agenda control the media. But what I can say is that very least we can stop providing material, right? If somebody wants, if there's a media agenda to paint the black man as negative, as violent, as aggressive, as not focused, uneducated, let's make ourselves educate. Let's educate ourselves. Let's learn how to temper ourselves. Let's share that information amongst each other, coach each other, encourage each other. I think there are a lot of things we can do to limit the amount of material that the media uses against us. We can all, I think everybody on this panel can agree that there are forces that just play against us, right? We're going to always get treated more harshly. We're going to be depicted more unfairly. There's way less sympathy for black men than there are for any other demographic in this country. And so knowing that, instead of barking, and for me, I'm a practical person. I say do something about it. You can complain and hope people start treating you fairly. You want folks to determine fairly what mistake you made, if it's a mistake somebody else made, a woman made, or a white male made. But how about this? Don't make the mistake. And that's kind of my thought. Change the narrative by limiting the amount of material that the media can use against you to depict you a certain way.
Okay, I'm going to move that question over to Mr. Randolph. Joe, what's your opinion on how we change the negative narrative that the media portrays?
I think it starts with us first. We got to be the ones that want to make that change, and a lot of times when we got to hold each other accountable, and we got to hold, especially as black men, when we see opportunities to help another young brother or a brother in general that may be doing something that they shouldn't, that we know that could be negative in a sense, tell them. I think a lot of times we we hold back in giving that feedback. If you see a young man with his pants down, tell him to pull it up. It may be confrontational, or it may be something they may not like. They may cuss you out. They may be defensive. But I think being able to give them that feedback, being able to give them, and just helping a brother and just being able to approach them, but do it in a respectful manner. I teach at a university, so I interact with a lot of young brothers, and I try to tell them things that I had to learn the hard way. And they may not like it, but they get it and they make the adjustment. Some of them do, some of them don't. But I think we have to be willing to put ourselves out there to help another young brother or brother in general when we know that it could be negative, or if it is the media, it could be something that continues the negative stereotype. And I think we have to be the change and use ourselves as a tool to be those advocates for.
So what do you do if the young brother decides he doesn't like it and he swings on you?
Oh, I'm gonna knock him out. I mean, real talk. I'm gonna show him up, and I think that's the thing that my dad always taught me. Right? It was that when you run up on an old man, you better come correct, because the old man didn't play. And I think that in our generation, as we step into that leadership role, and we got disrespectful young men out there, we cannot be afraid to address them either, because what they're doing is not only disrespecting us, they're disrespecting the black women, they're disrespecting the black community. So we go back to this whole stereotype about what's being portrayed on the media. Let's face it, there are some stereotypes that they can show on TV. We need to eliminate that, as far as I'm concerned. So when it comes down to you got a guy walking around with his pants sagging down, that ain't right. It's not right. It's not right. And I think that we have to systematically, some way, get to the younger kids, if it's going back to elementary school, and make sure that they understand, what it is to sag your pants, where that came from. A lot of people don't tell that story. I don't think that we can necessarily correct an 18-year-old, 21-year-old. We can talk to them, pull them to the side, try to get counseling. But I think that what we need to do is to get to these kids before they start those bad habits.
I totally agree. So we'll go to the next question, which is there a difference in how Africans and African American men deal with race in America? And I'm going to start with Mr. Davidson.
Well, I haven't talked to a lot of African guys about this. I believe the answer is yes. And I think the reason that the answer is yes is if you look at the approaches that African men take to economic empowerment and things like that, they're a little bit more they're a little bit more
hustlers.
They're a little bit better at it. I mean, you look at the in Washington D.C., pretty much all the parking lots and all the parking garages are ran and owned and operated by Ethiopian or Eritrean families. And that's something that African American men have not done for ourselves. We haven't taken one thing and said we're going to dominate this part of the economy, we're going to support each other in that, we're going to give each other jobs in this area. You pull up to a parking lot in DC, you know who's gonna be there, who's gonna pick, who's taking your money at the valet. And it's a continual thing, and that money is being recycled in that community, and they're making it happen. There's, so there's a lot of things that when folks come over here, first or second generation, directly from the homeland, they're way more serious about supporting themselves and each other, way more serious about supporting their families, way more responsible. So I think the answer is yes, there is a difference, and they're doing a better job than we have. We've been here, 300-400 years and have helped build this country, but are not taking care of ourselves and putting ourselves in positions to continue to reap economic benefits and have growth in our own communities. So definitely some things we could learn from our African brothers.
I personally want to take that and give my answer on that, and I want to piggyback off what you said, because I'm a big believer in the economics. And like you said, one thing that frustrates me is, as a businessman, is it's not a lot of African Americans who I feel like try to go after serious industries. Like, a lot of times we want to do kind of in vogue things. We don't go after utilities like the parking lot, like you said, or things that everybody needs. And those are the ways that you truly build wealth, and you've created an asset that you can pass on to the next person. And sometimes I'm like, as African Americans, there's no reason we should have ever let people take the hair weave business from us, or the soul food business from us, or, we buy all these Jordans, we should own all the sneaker stores. You know what I'm saying? If we just did the things that we really love, we would all be rich, because then you'd have to have the distributors who would bring the products to the sneaker store. You'd have to have the distributor or the marketing company who would bring all the stuff to the hair care store. You had an advertising company who would make the ads for them. You have, the list goes on. And I feel like, I'm probably getting off a little bit, but that's a huge portion of why we're in the situation we're in.
Huge. Absolutely.
Huge, because if the dude in the hood knew, at the end of the day, the dude in the hood just wants to make some bread. So if there was another black business owner who was out there who could say, yo, instead of selling drugs, which is really a bad hustle, you can come work in my store and I'll show you this trade, I bet a lot of them would do it. All right. Let's go to the next question.
Hey, Jeremy.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, one thing that I think it starts from, it always goes back. We got to start reinvesting in our own business. We got to circulate the dollar in our communities, because the black business owner, if they don't see that money is going to be circulated back into their community, then they don't see the benefits of having their own business. But then take a step further, we got to begin to start that from day one when they're little, to teach them entrepreneurship, to teach them economic. That helps them grow into being entrepreneurs and building wealth. But we gotta begin to start.
All right, Joe, we're losing you. I am sorry.
Hold on, hey, I have a comment
Yes,
with respect to, in defense of the African American man. This conversation comes up, around the spades table, dinner table, and it's always like, Africans are more serious than African American. I will say this. There are differences in posture, right? If you're coming from Africa, you have a certain amount of resources. You're more likely to have come for education purposes. The demographic we're comparing is not apples to apples. So it's not. This thing is more complicated than Africans are more focused. Having come from a situation where we talk here and try to encourage ourselves by looking back to our heritage. We were kings. If you're coming right from that, and you came with resources, with a plan, you were sent here with a plan, it does make it a little different than if you came and you're a third generation project person who learned how to live and make ends meet by figuring out the system. And then that's what you're perpetuating. So it's not as simple as, or it's not like an innate situation. Now, the dynamics are more complicated than just saying, hey, African Americans need to be as focused as Africans.
Cool. Anybody else got any points they want to
Jeremy, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to just focus the question a little bit more on race and how you feel as an African American man versus how Africans who come from an African country feel as a black man in America. So is there a difference between coming from a country where you were raised to understand that African Americans or black people were in leadership and ran things and had businesses versus growing up as a black man in the United States of America, where sometimes you don't see those same things, and in a lot of instances white men are running businesses and are leading the cities that you're in. Is there a difference there with how you perceive the world?
I don't think there's a difference in terms of or I would say because we were born and raised here, so we don't know what it looks like. We hear about it. And so I don't know if we would be able to determine the difference. And I think Carlos was chiming in, so I'll let him speak more to it. But I don't believe that we would have a full understanding of what that looks like.
Yeah, I was just following up to exactly what Brandy was saying. It's been stated many times before that we as African Americans have a hard time just identifying who we are. when we talk about, cultural heritage, and where we come from, just like what Brandon was saying, if you were an African descent, you were seeing these things. I mean, this is the culture, even the family structure is totally different. But if you look at generation after generation where kids are having kids, and you look at all, the hood or whatever else you want to call it, what's around you and what you see in school, we've got a scarred history in America. Though, I mean, we've played a major part in helping to build this country, but we haven't seen what it means to really be of royalty and to really understand and have a real connection. We're still trying to find ourselves, and so I really feel like sometimes that we're here in America trying to really re-identify ourselves and with all the other pressures that are around us. But when you look at an African who comes in America, they see great opportunity, but they have a basis and something to be able to hold on to, an anchor, which is their heritage that they come out of.
So I want to interject and say, but at what point do we say, we have to kind of forget what happened and look at where we are and say, look, at the end of the day, this country provides the most opportunity of all countries that exist. And so while we do have the scars, while we do have the challenges, those are the things that make us better. And I know not everybody's going to have it, but at some point, if we don't change our orientation in life, if we don't change our perspective, are we really going to be able to get, ahead? Are we going to really be able to get what this country truly offers to everybody else, but seemingly not us?
So with that,
no, Jeremy, I think you're absolutely right.
Jeremy.
And I think is that we make excuses for ourselves as opposed to holding ourselves accountable for succeeding in America. We have a lot of success stories in the Black community, and it's definitely something that we're past the point of making excuses. We're past the point of talking about things that are holding us back. We should be making things happen, and we should be getting together as a community and making it happen without excuses. It's something that is long overdue for us to get over it. You know what I'm saying? We have to get over it. Like, nobody's going to get over it for us except for us.
Okay, we're going to move on to
So along those lines, when we talk about trying to get over what has occurred, how do we ensure that African American men coming up now understand the similarities between the 50s and 60s and the civil rights movement and what is occurring today in places like Ferguson?
So the biggest deal is that every generation is further and further removed from the civil rights era. I had a conversation earlier about the fact that when I went to Memphis and went to the National Civil Rights Institute Museum, there was a renewed energy. There was some anger there, but there was a little knowledge that was passed on. Because every time I go, I learn something different, and I walked out with a renewed focus. And I think unless you are completely immersed in that time, the time where you could be beaten, or you could, somebody could stop you and shake you down for no reason and call you all type of names and, tell you to get to the back of the bus. It's hard for us to relate to that. And I don't think that just history class does enough. I don't think that Black History Month in February does enough justice to where we came from. And so we've got to find other ways. And so unfortunately, in finding those other ways, what I find is that we have our younger folks saying, well, that's dead, that's over, that's done. I don't need to know that. Why we keep beating a dead horse? That may have happened then, but I think they don't understand that, in 1858, 1868, and I don't want to get into the numbers because I know somebody's going to fact check me out there, but in the 1800s, we had civil rights. We had the ability to vote, and then we went backwards, and it took us to 1964 to get it again. So it's like history repeats itself, and if we're not careful, we'll fall back into that. So we've got to find a way to jolt this generation and generations behind us to understand that we haven't arrived.
I'd like to respond to the question with a sort of perspective. I actually don't think that what's happening in Ferguson is the same as what was happening in the 60s. And I think that's part of the problem. I think when something happens and it looks like what was happening back then, I think we think that the response needs to be what the response was back then. The landscape of America has totally changed. The landscape of the entire world has changed. What changed and what caused this in the 60s. And so I think, I viewership to consider, is it the same thing? I definitely agree with Chair Barnes that we have to know our history, and we need to know it and know how important it was and how it worked. But I think we, not just the young people, but the older people need to really understand how it worked. Because one of the problems is that people think, we got out there and marched and things changed. They don't tie what changed. We shamed those who were doing wrong into doing right because they were trying to take a moral high ground, and our international relationships put pressure and things like that. There were certain economic factors that were going on that aren't the same today. So if we just look at things from a broad lens and say, okay, they did this in response to a tragic death, so let's do that in response to a tragic death. That's why we don't get the same results. I think we need to be more surgical, look at what's going to actually make people bend. What moves now? I mean, I'm kind of with Jeremy. The almighty dollar makes things move, and that's not going to change, and it's more acute today. And I think we need to focus our energies on those type of activities with respect to civic action, and really dissect what's going on and what the civic movement should be about today in 2014 and going forward.
Yeah, I want to jump into that. I mean, I don't think you can use, 20th century solutions with 21st century, problems. No matter, how similar, those issues are. We're roughly, 40-ish years or so, 40, 50 years or so from civil rights bill in 64 and Voting Rights Act of 65. We're seeing some of those same issues still surface today. So it is very much so important to know your history and understand what happened in the past and how those things were addressed. But it's also important to understand, those issues and what they mean today. And how similar but how different they are, and how we, I'm a fan of comprehensive responses to things, and I think that in some ways that was the approach that was taken back in the civil rights era. You had folks on the ground marching, you had folks like the Urban League in the boardroom, you had the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in the courtroom. So I think some of those similar approaches are still needed. But in the grand scheme of things, we've made a lot of progress in terms of race, and I think that's true purely by looking at the generations and how they perceive civil rights in general, and how they respond and feel that things are different, or because now they sit in a classroom that's multicultural and very diverse, versus your parents who sat in a classroom that perhaps was all black. The perceptions are different, and so it's important to communicate the past to our current generation, but it's also important to work with them and understand how they see the world, and understand how solutions can come from not only our viewpoint with a hint of the civil rights past, but also this day and age and what works today.
So we do have a couple of questions from Facebook that I believe fit into what we're discussing right now, which is from Terrence out of the Atlanta chapter. How do we force the media to display positive images of Black Americans? The negative image brainwash American, including our young people. And I think the brainwash is the similarity, even if the circumstance is different from the 50s and 60s to now, we still have some image issues to overcome as African Americans and as African American men. So who would like to field that question?
I'll take it first. I think, like what Travis said earlier, we got to stop giving them ammo. Like, overall, I mean, I'm going to just keep it real. as a race, as black men, overall, we're underachievers. Like, the majority of us do not do what we're supposed to do. We give the media ammo. We all need to, and like what was said, also said earlier, like what Joe said, we need to hold each other accountable. If you see somebody who has their pants down, we should go to them in a respectful manner. Get to know who they are. Ask them their name. Talk to them. Try to see what they're about. And try to make them feel good, because at the end of the day, they probably don't feel good. They probably feel threatened by people. They probably don't feel loved. And so we got to start with everybody we encounter and try to pour something positive into them so that they feel better about themselves, so they don't feel like they have to walk around and feel like they need to intimidate people. Because the only people who feel like they need to intimidate people are criminals or people who don't like who they are. That's just my 2 cents on it.
And if I can add to that, I think the way that you get the media is to own the media. And, you know, there are a lot of opportunities there are some black-owned television stations, and there's Radio 1, and I forget Oprah has a network, and some other folks have networks, and BET used to be black-owned, and you know, it has to be something that we do ourselves. It's not going to change. It's not going to be that we can't go out and do 1,000 positive things in the hopes that one of them gets on TV. We're going to have to start taking it into our own hands, buying television stations, buying television time, buying media time, and putting these stories out there ourselves. We're going to have to change the conversation directly. That's really the only way to deal with the media, is to be the media.
I think
you bring up an important point.
Can I just say one quick thing in there?
Important point, because there's another question. I'll send it right back to you, Jeremy, for this question. In that, did integration really harm us because we used to have our own stations and we used to have our own media outlets? Did the fact that we are integrated with other people cause us to have different images of ourselves? Jeremy, I'll go to you, and then Travis, and then Elijah.
Oh, I wanted just to piggyback on what Hakeem said about owning the media. There was another group that felt like they were persecuted. That was the homosexual community, and what they did was they changed the conversation. So I just wanted to say that. Regarding segregation, I think that's a very big issue. I could see how some people believe that before we had the black millionaires and we had the black sense of family and we had the black community, and while we weren't allowed to interact, I would never say that I think that that should be condoned. But the one thing I will say is I think as things would have progressed, if they had kept segregation, it would have been detrimental to the economics of white society, because as black people had continued to do commerce with one another, the dummies who didn't want to take the black money, they would have went out of business anyway. I would never say I think that segregation was a good thing, but the truth is eventually it would have come crashing down because of the fact that people weren't getting that black dollar.
With respect to the integration question, so integration, all it was a mechanism that forced a result, forced a tactic that worked in our favor, right? So because we couldn't eat here, we couldn't stay overnight there, we couldn't learn there, we built our own, right? Segregation, and then integration. Say, okay, we can do these things everywhere. I think it's not necessarily the system. It's our response to integration is the problem. The mindset that, okay, now we're over here and it's better. Now that that's open, it's better. That's what the problem is. You can build your own, whether it is society, integrated society, and strong regardless. So I think it's more so the mindset than the actual system. I also want to kind of go back to the media question. This is something that is consistent. I'm going to practice what we've been preaching. We talk about accountability. You want to change the media narrative. The media is used to push product and services, and we act like the media is just spoon feeding us terrible stuff. I mean, to be real, we watch terrible stuff, right? You got your TV set, basketball wives and Real Housewives and whatever it is. and you watch it, and now there's gonna be some people out there like, oh man, that's my show, whatever. But it's true. If you watch it and the ratings are high, then they're gonna feed you that, and somebody's gonna make a copy of that show, and they're gonna make a spin off of that show, and then they're gonna sell a Charmin on that show, and they're gonna sell a deodorant on that show, and they're gonna sell a hair care products on that show. So it's not just about, hey, us doing the right thing as far as being, model citizens. It's also what we consume, what we choose to consume. What do we tell the media we want? Stop watching that stuff. Stop listening to the stuff. If it's negative, you listen to it. I mean, you part of the problem. We all part of the problem. So we want to keep it real. If you out there and you're a huge fan of that media garbage, here's something to think about. We talk about takeaways from this conversation. Think about it come tomorrow, Thursday, or whatever day it comes on.
Yeah, well, so I feel like I got two questions on the table, and I want to kind of talk about both of them. Segregation. I think Travis hit the nail on the head with it. And so, long story short, the fact of the matter is, African Americans have strong buying power in this country, and I don't think that we actually utilize that to our advantage. I don't think we're organized enough to and cooperative enough with each other to actually use that buying power to our advantage. And I think it's my personal opinion. In terms of the media, I kind of have a vulnerable, moment here in terms of, media perception of the black man it's in some ways what we put out there. I struggle. For example, I was sitting down watching the CNN coverage of Ferguson, and you can see Don Lemon and some of these other CNN reporters walking up the street, and you got my black brothers and behind them, walking with masks covering their faces, and just wanting to be on TV, and in essence perpetuating what people typically think of us. And so I personally struggle with that. One, from the standpoint of like I grew up in New Orleans, and so when I was growing up, Cash Money was hot, and so everybody had they Jabos with their white T-shirt and they Reebok Soldiers or they G Nikes, and so that's what you did, and that's what I did. When I got out of college, I had a whole closet full of Jabos. Now I got a whole closet full of suits, and so that's just that mindset. So in essence, if you look at me then, you look at me now, you wouldn't be able to put two and two together. And in terms, that's just been my personal, growth process. And unfortunately, some of our folks haven't and don't quite ever grow and quite change that perception. So yes, I think the media contributes to the perception, to a negative perception of African American men, but also think we do our own fair share of damage. And I think that's responsibility that we need to take up and help our folks, see that there's better opportunity, that there's a different way, that there's a better way of presenting yourself.
So thank you, Elijah. And Travis and Jeremy. The next question that we have has to do with politics and how we can encourage our African American leaders to have conversations, especially the Black ones, to really have conversations in the community about the issues that we face. And William, I'm going to throw that one at you, and then immediately following Carlos, I've got something for you.
So I think that what we need to first do is understand the value. I think there were some Facebook questions out there that we were reading about some folks that were very interested in how politics plays into our ability to be a free society and be a better community, the Black community being a better community. And we've got to engage them. I mean, it sounds very cliche, but it's the answer, voting. That's one of the, it comes down to the basis. If you look at what happened in Ferguson, and going back to the common events, we're saying 15% of our folks came out, and then we want to complain. Now, should we be complaining? Absolutely. Should we honor Mike Brown? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's the failure of everybody in that community that didn't go out to the polls and vote, that 85% of the folks that didn't go to the polls and vote, so that there were people that looked like us, or at least that had the same interests as us, by getting engaged into the system. So the question, I think, was, well, how do we get them engaged? We've got to show that we are voting bloc. So just like we talk about economic empowerment and our black dollar, and how we talk about that there's only a dollar, in the black community, our dollar kind of circulates every 6 hours, and we want to do something about it. Well, the same thing has to occur. We have to increase our voting participation. But there was a question that just recently happened around the last conference we attended, and it was, okay, is politics or is voting really what we should be focused on? And there were people saying, well, the Urban League and the NAACP and others that really focus on politics, it's not enough. And it boils back to our self-accountability. Are we projecting or teaching our kids how to act? And, we got people defending, well, why should my kid not be able to walk down the street sagging? And then the question is, really, you ask me why your child should not be walking down the street sagging? The thing is that, well, we shouldn't have to change who we are in public. Well, some of what we are isn't what I would like us to be. So overall, are we really carrying ourselves with respect? So at the end of the day, going back to the question, before I get on my soapbox, you've got to prove to the politicians that we're serious about what it is we do. They only listen to votes and money. So if you don't have the money, at least have the votes. We've got to find a way to get out at better than 15%, 24%, 30% of the vote.
Jeremy, you had something to add on politics?
Yeah, my thing is, I agree totally with William. Personally, I think another thing is, why do we give one party, why does one party know that they're guaranteed one group's vote? And I know if a person, in reality, if we look at reality, reality says if a person knows that they get somebody's vote all the time, or they know they don't have to work for something, then is that person really going to work for you when, you're not looking? I think that has to also be a question that's asked, which is, why do people sometimes, by default, it at least seems, get our vote just because that's just historically what we've done? That's my 2 cents once again.
Thanks, Jeremy. Carlos, we've got a question that I think you would be great to answer, which is about respectability politics. We talked earlier about what black men shouldn't do in order to ensure, I think Elijah talked about it, ensure that they're perceived a certain way in the media. Is there an expectation that we should just be able to be the way we are and be respected for who we are, without having to change the way that our pants sag or how we look or the length of our hair and things of that nature? Could you expound on that?
Well, I think that going back to what I stated earlier, and that's the identity piece. Just like fashion or anything else, things kind of go in cycles. And so right now, what we're seeing is more and more of the, the sagging pants, some of the music and the things that we're seeing. But, also going back to when we were in Memphis this past weekend, looking at what was the culture at that particular time. And one of the things when we were at the Stax Museum, which was stated, was talking about how blacks and whites were working together to create music. And music sometimes, and even and sometimes in politics, depending on where you land on certain things, it can be a great equalizer in some respect. But the moment that Martin Luther King was assassinated, one of the gentlemen said that next day that they walked into the studio, everything changed. They began to see each other in a different light. And so when we talk about some of the things that you can do when it comes about being respectable and understanding that we are a minority. In some respect, you can, people talk about, we're part of a minority majority that's going to be taken over in some, in time with Hispanics and so forth, but we're still a minority. We don't really set the pace in some respects. So, and I look here and I'm seeing Hakeemu popping up on my screen right now. But, in some respects, some people would probably talk about Hakeemu in his hair, and saying that, in certain jobs that he
it would not be professional, to have locks or whatever else. So, same thing, with you, Brandy. They would say that was not be respectable to have that in certain jobs. But I think that in some respect, it takes time. There was, but when you force the issue, even in the military, they were talking about females and their hair and being able to wear it. You just have to put that issue before folks, and you have to stay and keep it up in the forefront. But there is a balance, and you've got to know how to play within that system, and things are more systemized, and as far as how discrimination and other things are kind of worked out, versus just I guess in some respects, some people could say that how more blatant it is today, but you've got to play, and when I say play, that's like you've got to know good etiquette. You've got to know how to present yourself, and Kevin. Out of Las Vegas, Kevin Hooks made a point when he was pointing about a young man who wanted to interview for a job when he was out in Cincinnati, and he saw this young man, and he was waiting to interview, and he felt like should he said something to him when he saw his pants hanging out or sitting down there, but I think it goes back to that same thing. People will continue to do what they or imitate what they see or imitate what they see, and so unless we speak up and we say something about it, those things won't really change.
So on those same lines, we in the National Urban League Young Professionals really focus on mentorship and bringing up men to be leaders within our communities, and all of you do that. Joe and Travis, can you talk about mentorship? And we do have some members, and we have a question on Facebook from a single mom who's interested in what she can do to instill manliness in her son as a single mother. And then we also have a question from Richard out of New York about what are some ideas and ways that we can capture the attention of our youth and keep them out of harm's way. So if you guys could address those.
This Joe, I don't know if you can hear me, but a couple of things in reference to the single mother question is, one of the things I would say to instill confidence is identify opportunities where you can possibly pair him with other African American men, whether it's a program through one of the fraternities or whether it's a program through one of the other professional organizations like the 100 Black Men. They have a lot of mentoring programs because in some cases. Young men just need to be able to talk to someone about things that his mom can't. Being able to mentor young men, that's the biggest thing that, they just want to talk, and they want to be able to talk about things and share things, what's on their mind that their mom may not be able to relate to them. And that's one of the biggest things that I've seen that's been able to instill confidence, because they're able to get the perspective of someone that's been there in that same position, and can relate to them. And I think it also allows them to be able to ask those questions that may be uncomfortable as well. Now there's a balance in terms of what those mentors or mentees may say, but you want to make sure that you can pair them with someone or put them in a program where they can have those conversations and have that dialogue, because ultimately those are the things that they can't have with their mom or their sisters. And coming from living with two older sisters as well as a mother, it definitely, my father was around, but I also had other men that I could talk to within the community that helped guide me and help be as much as my success as the other men in my family. And I think that's the biggest thing that a single mother could do, is seek out those mentors in their community that could help be that resource and help be that person to have that conversation with their son.
Elijah, you wanted to add something to that conversation?
Yeah, just a little. I'm a product of a single parent household, and the oldest child of 3. So I spent a lot of time trying to help my mom get through a lot of struggles of being a single parent and being a single parent on a teacher's salary, kind of thing. And so I think growing up in a single parent household did a lot for me, but I think Joe hit on a lot of it. There was also some things that I didn't get, and also a lot of conversations that I never was able to have with a dad, and sometimes I regret that kind of thing. But I do say that structure is very important for a young man in a single parent household, and I think it's very important that as a single parent, single mom, that there's some discipline there, and that you instill in that son respect for people, respect for women, and just structure, studying and things like that. I think Joe hit it with being around other men, but it's also important, I think, to be around not just other men through various programs and things like that, but be around other boys, that child's age, whether it's putting them in, on a basketball team or a baseball team or a soccer team, whether it's a church thing or after school thing. I think structure in general, as well as exposure to men who can be role models, but also, being around young boys that child's age is very important.
Thanks, Elijah. Travis, I'm gonna repeat this for you because we've had some other conversations since the question was asked. But what types of solutions can we provide to young men, and what ways can we capture their attention so that we can provide or create change in their lives so that they can be even more successful than we've been?
Sure. So mentorship is near and dear to me, and I've had a lot of experiences with different situations. Kids come from all walks of the earth in different situations at the house, and I'll say there are a couple of things, regardless of where the kids are coming from or the situation they have at home, that are good practices. As a mentor or anybody that's trying to reach a young person, I mean, the first thing you have to do is establish trust. And the way to do that is to just be real, be genuine. Sometimes when you're mentor, you might come with a group of other mentors, and I'll tell you, I always see where folks' foot fault is always sort of that, yeah, I'm here to check a box, I'm doing something great. See, I'm magnanimous. Kids see right through that. Youth, young adults, whatever age, they see right through that. And then if you try to project yourself to be too perfect, that doesn't get through. So one of the things I would say is when you introduce yourself and you're meeting young people in a situation, be as authentic as you can, be as vulnerable as you can, and that'll bring their guard down. And I think that's something I try to encourage other mentors to do. And once you do that, then you can have real dialogue. You can actually get through to them. Those things that they reject, stuff that we say, we can't get through to them about, they will actually listen to a person who they believe is telling the truth and has their best interest at heart. Kids are very simple, and they the other thing they want, they sometimes with respect to young men in particular. Young men, whether they coming from a single home, sometimes dad's at home, but dad's not the man. I didn't come from a single home, big Trav, but he did play with my mom. And we're not talking about corporal punishment. We're talking about discipline, as in there are consequences to your actions. You will not get what you want when you don't do what you need to do. People will see you a certain way if you don't hold yourself up to certain standards of character. We would have conversations, and sometimes through his actions and my mom's actions, I would learn those things. We don't always have to give young people what they want to maybe compensate for what we think they don't have. Discipline and authenticity, and then just try to find out, let them lead you to what they're interested in, and foster other lessons that you want to impart through the subject matter that they're interested in. So if you want to give life lessons about studying and school and work, you might need to let them lead you to a game or something that they like to do, and then intertwine those principles you want to teach them in those things. It's not always about us coming, it's about us being there. Don't go to the children, be there for them.
So Travis, or one of you along those lines, we had an interesting question on Twitter. Since when did sagging pants become a part of our culture? Is that really culture or a fad that is?
Well, I mean, you know, I think we talked about this before. Uh, I think we talked about this before. There's no way that's part of the culture. And when we're talking about this, I kind of wanted to chime in. You know, we always have this dichotomy where it's like, do black men what whether it be hair, clothing. Um, there's a truth about that we don't like to admit. White people have to fit in to a certain culture as well. You know, I think there's a presumption that, okay, you know, sagging pants is not accepted in the workplace from black people. I mean, white professional men, women, they don't sag their pants because they would be looked at crazy if they sag their pants. There are some things that aren't black and aren't white. They are literally professional and what people expect. No, sagging pants is not part of the culture. I'm with William with respect to parents who defend that, or, you know, he's just expressing himself. Okay, so fine, you want to express yourself. You know, I'm a lawyer, and one of the things I try to tell people all the time, you know, folks do something, they say something crazy that's offensive, and they say, you know, I'm Second Amendment right. Fine, you have your Second Amendment. You don't have to go to jail. But that doesn't mean people have to like it, and that means people have to not see you a certain way or not treat you a certain way. Express yourself. Be all about that. But understand there are consequences to the way you express yourself. So if you want to sag your pants and somebody doesn't want to hire you, or they think you're a thug because of it, you got to accept that. If you don't want to be seen that way, then do different things.
So Hakeemu, and then William, how can we move from the cycle of constant discussion and yearly initiatives as a community? All organizations, and of course, mentoring should be mandatory, and that came from Lawrence Gonzalez. Hakeemu, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about really implementing true change, one of the obstacles, and I don't even think this is a black thing per se. I know it's not a black thing per se, but one of the obstacles is the fact that people want to have credit. They want to be seen as being the leader of this, the leader of that. When the issue is serious enough to us to really take egos out of it and not be the one that has to be the credit, don't need to be the one that has to be seen in front of the cameras, don't need to be the one that has to have the name at the top of the marquee, that's when actual change solution discussions will start. And you know, it's kind of like the entrepreneurial mindset. People who have successful businesses have them because in their mind they have to be successful. And when we get to a point where we decide that we have to make change in our community, we have to get the stand your ground laws off the books in the state of Florida and everywhere else, all the other 20 some odd states that similar laws are in effect. We have to decide that we have to start protecting our young black men, and we have to start getting them to pull their pants up and not follow jail culture, which is where all that comes from, which is a ridiculous place to get your fashion tips. We really truly decide we have to do this, and we don't individually need credit. That's when we'll really start having some change. There are a lot of talented people in our community. There are a lot of talented people in this organization and other organizations that truly want to make change. And I think that sometimes these tragedies are the closest thing that gets us to that point where we can say we need to do something. I don't need the credit. It just needs to get done. So when we get that sense of urgency in our community, we will absolutely be able to make change and affect ourselves in a positive manner. But until we can get on one accord, it's not. We're going to continue to have problems.
So, Hakeemu, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I want to reinforce what you're saying, because I think what's missing in our community is that spirit of fellowship. I remember Malcolm X, The Story. It was a 3-hour movie. But one of the most exciting scenes for me is when the brothers all marched one behind another. They were going to get their friend out of jail. They lined up right in front of the police. Malcolm walks into the office and said, "We're not leaving until, you know, he's free." And if you remember the scene, he holds his hands up and he points into the right direction, and all of them kind of with precision, they turn and they all move in a unit. When you look at the pictures from Birmingham and from Washington and you see King out front, and he's locking arms with Jesse Jackson and others, there was a sense of discipline, and it wasn't about everybody being at the top of the key. There was discipline to say that we can follow other folks and we can still have input, and we don't have to be at the top of the ticket to get things done. And I can't tell you how passionate I am about the fact when you look around and there's a question about, well, where are our civil rights leaders of the day? And I think Madam President stated it eloquently. They said, well, we're at work. You know, of this generation, we're at work. That's where we're supposed to be. Otherwise, we wouldn't be considered productive citizens. But what I do think is missing is the mentality that we can follow someone else's lead and support them wholeheartedly and not backstab, not backslide. You know, and I'll end with this. In Alabama, I live in a community that's probably 10 or 11 blocks, and there are 9 churches there's one church on every single block in that community. And what that tells me is that you got every pastor wants to pastor a church. And so we dilute the power of what the black church is all about because everybody wants to lead. So until we, from a solution perspective, I think fellowship needs to be a new word for us just as well as leadership. We've got to have the ability to go out and follow people with a true, pure heart. And the person that's out front, they need to worry about a dagger being put in their back because they're out front. They know they've got people that'll be there with them.
Said those are all like great solutions for how we can move forward together. But one of the reasons why we're on this call is what happened in Ferguson. And so we talked a little bit about solutions as it relates to ask the question about police officers and the number of police officers that we had in that community that are African American. And it's about the importance of having a certain number of black police officers to whether or not we're racially profiled.
I definitely think that has an implication because at the end of the day, people are people, regardless white, black, Chinese, Asian, whatever. If I'm an officer and I see a young black guy with his pants sagged because he reminds me of somebody that I already know, I'm going to probably give him the benefit of the doubt. And so it is important to try to get more African Americans to be police officers because then more benefit of the doubt would be extended. The challenge, though, is that's not a profession that is glorified in our community. That's not something that we feel like we're to be a part of. It's just like, you know, in the Irish community in the northern states, that's the thing that they do. That's a lot of people follow their uncles and their cousins and their fathers, and they become police officers and they see the value of it. So I think we can't just imagine that that's going to happen if we haven't taken the steps to say, how do we get there? Now, how do we get there? I think the community and I think the police department need to do more community events. They need to have more dance-offs and cookouts and basketball games so that they can get to know each other on a more personal level. Because at the end of the day, you know, the outward appearance is such a simplistic thing about us as human beings. And so just like anybody, you know, when you get to know them and you see that y'all have a commonality, you're from the same place, you like the same things, well, barriers drop. And, you know, people start to give people the benefit of the doubt, and people start to have conversations, and then they're invested and they're interested in this other person. And then that officer is not going to want to put a felony on somebody because they were smoking weed, and they may ruin that person's chances of getting a job later on. So I think it's on both sides. I think both sides need to reach out. And I think, yes, it's definitely a challenge because there's scars on both sides. I mean, on our community side, we don't trust the police overall. On the police side, they want to go home every day, so they're tense, they got a gun on them. A lot of those people were people who may not have, you know, whatever. I mean, it's all over the map why people became police officers. But at the end of the day, there's just a lot of stress in that situation. And I think communication is what will solve that problem. But back to your question, yes, I do think the fact that the numbers are low is a reason that we have some of the issues we have.
Have you noticed, and this question is open to any of you, have you noticed a different mood among African American men after what happened in Ferguson, what happened with Trayvon Martin, has your overall psyche changed?
I don't know if I would call it a change as much as it's a reminder and a return to a darker place that, based on some of the experiences we've had, a lot of black men have been to at a different point in time. You know, we've the majority of us, I can't speak for everybody, have had some form of discrimination, prejudice, stereotype, straight up racism imparted against us, either by the police, some store manager, a teacher, a professor, somebody in a position of authority, or somebody who was in a position of authority. And it's always there. It may not be at the forefront for you that day, but it's always there. So when, you know, people are getting killed in the streets in Missouri and in subdivisions in Florida, it's kind of just takes you back to that place of despair almost, and possibly a motivation to get out and make some changes. But it's you know, it definitely has an effect on how you feel just about, you know, being a black man in America and trying to make a difference and trying to support your community and live your life.
So what do you do, regardless of specifically how you feel about the situation? What actions do you take as an African American man in this country when you're? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, personally speaking, for me, you know, usually my interaction with the police, you know, I have 2 educated parents that know how to talk to people. I mean, I know how to talk to people. I have, you know, grandparents who've had battles with the authority, as some of you guys know, and go to court. I mean, there's a difference between being scared of police and understanding that this guy has a gun and the right to throw you in jail and not tell anybody about it. You know, so there's a level of additional respect that you just have to give them, and that you just have to take certain things from this situation. This is what it's going to be. But you know, police are responsive to talk. So if you give a police officer a reason to be suspicious of you, or a reason to think that you might be more of a threat than he already thinks you are, then he will treat you as that. You know, these guys are on edge all the time. Being a police officer is not a safe job by any stretch of the imagination. So I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But you know, we generally, when I've treated officers with respect, even if their initial tone towards me was too aggressive or negative, you know, just continuing to have that respectful dialogue, it kind of diffuses that situation. Whereas I have friends who, when the cop says something crazy to them, they're ready to go, they're ready to fight, and they get put in jail, you know, right away for some fraudulent charge, and then they have to call me to bail them out, and things go. And now they have a record because they let this cop get them upset. I mean, so it's always just understand that this person does have more power than you right now in this situation, and you need to be cognizant of that and act accordingly. As difficult as that may be, or as unseemly as it may be, that is reality when the cop is in your face.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts on that. Yeah, so here's the thing that people need to understand. When you interact with a police officer, so let me put my disclaimer out there. More times than not, police officers are actually good people. I know the narrative that's not a popular narrative in the African American community, but the majority of police officers actually are good people. So let me give you some context to be thinking about when you go and you have an interaction with a police officer. All the craziness with Ferguson aside, these people their job is to protect us. They go to fire, they go towards the shot, they go away from it. These people who just found out last week they didn't come home, they won't come home every day. And like it or not, and even if they tell you this, you might not believe it, it's true. If your job is to go towards danger and harm, you're not going to be friendly in every situation. You're not. You're on edge. And if you've been brainwashed, like a lot of folks, by media representations of that goes into their approach. Now, that said, there are some dirty.
Looks like we
Hello?
lost our
We lost
in-house attorney.
Travis. Lost our attorney. Yeah, absolutely. So, we have some people believe that we should employ some level of civil disobedience in our responses.
People seem to think that. So I fell off for a minute, but I wanted to wrap that question. I think people tend to think that, you know, police officers, or not just police officers, people in any job is somehow not the person that they are. You know, yes, racism exists. There are racists who somehow get a badge, right? So I say this: whenever you're approaching an officer, don't assume that, you know, not all officers are bad, but assume that if you deal with the bad officer, it could be the end of your life. So while in your mind, I just told you, not all officers are bad, if you run into one, the gravity of the consequences. So now I can teach your rights. You can have your rights. Right now, that's a big campaign.
So what Travis was just saying was the fact that the gravity of the situation, if you run into a bad officer, could cost you life. I think that's a point that we need to make sure that we got. But we're going to move to this conversation about disobedience. Some people are just mad about what's going on and would like for us to come up with strategies that employ acts of civil disobedience. So, William, if you could talk about that, and then if you could respond to the fact that when you were talking about fellowship earlier, someone asked the question, so who exactly are we following now?
So the civil disobedience question, I want to throw out there that there have been conversations that have been had about take up arms, you know, in terms of, you know, retaliation and things that we have. I think there was a case where we had some of our white sisters and brothers, Caucasian sisters and brothers, do just that, and they walked away with their lives. But in regards to just, and I don't think that we can do that. There's a real difference, you know, in the color of our skin. We have to know what it is that we can and cannot do, and I think that that's something that would be a huge mistake for us. We just don't have the same leverage. But so far as the civil disobedience, you know, we have the framework, we have the blueprint, we have what one of my good friends labeled Dr. King as is the ultimate YP. This dude was 26 years old, leading a bus boycott. And so the civil disobedience still, I think, comes behind the fact that we have to make sure that when we look behind us, whoever's out front, that they're following. So what does that look like? I mean, in the case of Ferguson, the issue with our generation is that we have to work, right? So most of these groups, there are 3 or 4 or 5 prominent groups with civil rights leaders that's what they do every day. They collect a paycheck to go throughout the nation and defend us. Can we do it at that same level? Probably not. But what has to happen is in every community, there has to be a level of respect for these leaders. I saw something, and regardless of what you think about Reverend Jesse Jackson, I saw something that was despicable on Facebook where a guy walked up to him and said, you know, you get out of town, you know, we don't have to do what you say do. And this is one of our own from our own community that recorded it to be sure that it was for the world to see. And so what the reason I brought that up is I thought that was a despicable act to assault what is seen as one of our leaders in our own community. So the civil disobedience has to be to where when you have a leader drop it to an Reverend Al Sharpton, you know, we crack jokes about the perm, we crack jokes about, you know, the rhyming of Jesse Jackson, but at the end of the day, those, I believe they happen to be serious and they serve a purpose. You know, what is our faith? What is our level in them? What is not in them? It's about the action that we do. So if they call us to the street and we act in a mannerable way and we do the things that need to be done and we're not being violent about what it is, then yeah, they're out front because they'll get the media. But at the end of the day, it was the masses of the folks that were behind them that actually got the job done. So quickly, who's leading? I don't have an answer for that. There has to be some folks that emerge. I feel like there have been people that have tried to emerge that because of the backbiting and the lack of fellowship in our community have not really been successful in leading. There have been people, I believe, that have come out and tried to lead marches and try to have a voice and travel throughout the nation to do it. And, people throughout Philip Agnew's name, some people like him, some people don't. So the first thing we do is we do have to identify them. But those leaders, I think, have to be comfortable with the fact that when they lead, there will be people following them. And so I can't really answer the question who's leading right now, but hopefully we will be able to encourage those that we know can stand out front and know that we have their back.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
And I'll make it brief. I don't want to say I'm a fan of civil rights, but I take great interest in it. And just a small comparison. If you look back to the just say the 60s, the fact of the matter is, most folks will point to a Dr. King and a Malcolm X, but the fact of the matter is there were a ton of leaders. Everybody didn't agree with Dr. King's approach, and as time went on, there was more and more folks who was speaking out against it, and so you have your SNC groups and your student coalitions and your Nation of Islam and just a wide variety of folks that existed. And so point being, I personally think a collective following is better than a scattered following. But point being, I think that you can have multiple leaders. I think those leaders do need to be better established, but I also think that, as the point was made earlier, that fellowship is critically important, that you follow, and everybody can't lead, but there has to be some worker bees that's out there, they're doing the work as well. So that's all I want to chime in and say.
So we have another question from Facebook that I want to get answered from Kayla Crawford, and I'm going to throw it to you, Carlos. She says, we cannot end discrimination unless we realize privilege. Race and ethnicity shouldn't be a dividing line in society, but it is. At what point do we acknowledge the importance of educating our non-minority colleagues, as they will be beneficial to lessening the acts of discrimination?
I lost the last part of that one, but I would simply say that there are organizations that are out there. I'll just simply say that there are organizations that are out there right now, and just like locally here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we've got a group called VCIC, the Virginia Center of Inclusive Communities. And so if I could put it in one word, it's more dialogue. When you bring individuals together in a room to have open dialogue amongst one another, and to see that there may be differences in your background, but that there are just as many areas that you actually have commonality amongst one another. So to dispel some of the fears, the old adage was, it's been stated that a kid doesn't come into this world feeling hate or discrimination against someone. That's something that's learned. It's something that's taught. And so when you begin to break down those barriers and you begin to dialogue and you begin to learn from each other and begin to respect one another's cultural differences and some of the likenesses alike, you can begin to move forward. I grew up in a very rough neighborhood. However, through integration, I had to go to a very culturally diverse schools. So some of my friends were, white and Hispanic and Puerto Rican, things like that. And so, but when I began to go through these things and begin to talk to them growing up, it wasn't that there was, yeah, they look different from me. Yeah, they may live in a different neighborhood, but we had a lot of similarities. So I began really, like I said, just to summarize it all up, we have to have more dialogue, and we have to begin to have more things like this, and bringing other people from different cultures together to the table to talk about how we can work together to just build and break down some of those barriers and those walls.
Thank you, Carlos. Joe, did you have something to add about how we can work across diverse lines in order to be successful in the future?
No, I think Carlos hit it head on. I would the only thing I would add is um, even amongst ourselves, we got to understand our own path to competency as it relates around diversity and around inclusion. And I think, even taking a step further, I think we even have to make sure that we understand the diversity amongst our own in terms of race, because I think there are some differences there that cause us a little bit of conflict as well. But I think, as Carlos mentioned, it's getting that dialogue and just being uncomfortable, like I always say, and um, having that conversation.
Thank you, Joe. We want to make sure that we're ending this conversation on a high note, and we have very accomplished men on our board that we're proud of. Happen for them, but because they have done the work to get to where they are today. So if all of you could share just a snippet of your professional journey that may be instructive or helpful for some of the men who are listening on the call today and on the chat about how you were able to get to where you are. And we will start with Jeremy. And we have had a lot of questions, Jeremy, about economics. And so if you could focus your conversation on business so that maybe we can get an answer to that question in your story.
So my story was I kind of took the non-traditional path. I went to college, got a degree. I actually, just to give full disclosure, made a big mistake when I was in college and got put out of the college I was going to. Ended up going to another college. So at that point, I was like, hey, with this mistake that I made in my life, I'm going to have to always be better than everybody else for the rest of my life. The situation ended up working out for the benefit. Everything was all good, but it changed me as a person. And so I realized at that point that forever, I could never expect anybody to give me anything in life. And so went back to school after I got my degree, got into sound engineering, which, I was really into music and music production, kind of started looking around, didn't see that there were a lot of opportunities in the Virginia market to do it, so I said I need to add on to it. Asked a lot of questions, had a job as a bartender. Well, that taught me, kind of brought me out my shell. It taught me the ability to learn how to network with people quickly, ask them the right questions. And what I started finding out was there was a lot of people who had a lot of money, but they didn't always go the traditional pathway. And so I just would ask the pertinent questions. I would, get their feedback on my ideas. And so as I started doing that and working that job, a lot more people started saying, well, hey, they like me, and these are people of all races. They would say, do you do video production? And I say, no, I don't, but I learn. And so what I did was I found a way to get those skills. I interned at 2 different places. I was getting like 1 hour of sleep a night, just trying to get the skills because I could see that if I did that, it would take me to the next level. Got those skills. I was able to borrow the equipment even though I wasn't getting paid. I would do side hustles. I was making money. And then eventually I was hired by the school system, who then was like, we're going to have you working in this department. Paying me like basically minimum wage, but it was cool because I was still getting experience. Well, then people started asking me about websites and programming. Say, hey, don't know how to do it, but I'll learn. So I did that, took online classes. Next thing you know, people were asking me to build websites. So my business grew just from me just learning how to respond to the marketplace. I just would ask people questions. I would try to figure out, what they did, what made their business tick, what made them successful in life. And so eventually I got laid off from working in the school system. But I wasn't tripping because I was like, I'm not making that much money. I've learned some valuable skills out here. learn how to kind of grow my business. And quickly, about a month later, I had already had clients that replaced that lost income. And so now, today, the school system is one of my biggest clients because I created that relationship with them. I know a lot of people in there, and now they're like throwing all this work my way. And they actually offered me a job at one point, but I turned it down because I wanted to keep with my business. I said when I was 20 years old, by the time I was 30, I wanted to have a marketing company. And now I look back and I've achieved it. I hit step one, and now, it's on to the next goal. So what I would say to anybody is, I think you have to understand the importance of economics in the marketplace. It's not just something that exists and you can kind of ignore. Commerce is the lifeblood of America. So, people may feel like big companies don't do the right thing, or they don't understand, or they feel like people don't want to pay taxes. But at the end of the day, there's an economic infrastructure that this country, that the world is all built on top of. And you really got two decisions. You can learn it, immerse yourself in it, see how it can benefit you, or you're basically going to be taken victim of. The second thing, as I said, you got to follow whatever your passion is, and you always have to learn how does that work within today's marketplace, because you need money in order to be able to continue to do what you want to do and what your passion is. And so that's just kind of what I've learned. I wouldn't trade this pathway for anything else in life. Every day I learn something new, and I just thank God for the fact that my life and my family and everything has, come my way. The last thing I would say is always have a positive attitude, because one thing I have, for some reason, I have really good luck, and I don't deserve half the opportunities I get. A lot of them just fall in my lap just because I asked the right question, or, I'm talking to the right person. And so, if you have that positive mind state, you'd be surprised with what happens.
Joe, how about you? Travis, how?
All right, I'll get right into it because my connection is in and out. So, I'm a first-generation attorney in my family, and I was going to be a first-generation attorney, but certain responsibilities required him to just work and take care of the family. So, I had a lot of, not hard pressure, but expectation that I would carry a flag that was originally being carried by my original namesake. That's fine. A lot of us have that pressure, right? Especially in Americans, we have pressure being the first generation, whatever it is. But I also wanted to be, I wanted to be a lawyer, but I also wanted to be a business person. And I knew that I was going to have a law firm at some point from day one. And along the way, I focused solely on that one singular goal. I went to college thinking, okay, I need to get decent grades so I can get into a good law school. I went to the University of Michigan, had a great time there, enjoyed it. But one of the things I regret I didn't do was take advantage of learning for personal growth and development's sake. I was doing the work to get the grades, right? I wanted to check the box, but embracing the actual information and figuring out ways to leverage it and taking more advantage of opportunities to learn more and connect with more people, and actually, to the point we were talking about earlier, connect with other people from different backgrounds, races, socioeconomic status, just making more of an effort. Now, I did a good job at that, but I really wish I had understood how much those connections would matter and impact my ability to move forward in the place that I wanted to be. I wanted to be a lawyer owning his own business. People that you meet in college are lifelong friends. You got third-generation lawyers, third-generation business owners. Those have been future clients, contacts, whatever. And so having not really focused in on that at the time. So for anybody that's in college that's on this call, keep that in mind. Go to school, get the grades, but go to school to get the education and get the relationships. Same thing with respect to my law school experience. I kind of learned a little bit more by the time I was in law school and started to appreciate that more. But I still wish I had taken advantage of it on a greater level. Fast forward, I did well from law school in University of Michigan, so I had a lot of job offers. Even though I wanted to start my own law firm, I knew that I had to pay a certain price in education and practical experience by going to a large corporate firm and learning to be a corporate lawyer, and you don't just hang your shingle out and say, hire me to do your multi-million-dollar merger or your financing. It just doesn't happen. So I had to go to a place where I didn't plan on going, and that wasn't in my vision, but was what I did. So I had to take my lumps and go do it. Now, in connection with that, they paid me well. And so this is another thing that I would say think about. Now I thought more about, you can build cash and not think about sort of how you use it, your, whether it be cash or business investments or anything, because it's coming, you feel like it's always there. I would say hadn't had that stability and that guaranteed money, and thinking about using that more wisely on the transition to be an entrepreneur. I wish I had thought about that more. Being a first generation attorney, a first generation professional in this regard, as far as the type of money I was making wasn't the type of money that anybody in my family had. So I was learning all that on the fly. I wish somebody had told me how to manage money, savings, compound it. I recommend anybody listening, if you're doing great and that's your job, think about ways to be even more intelligent with your money. If you're smart with your money, there's always more intelligence that you can gain around your money. So research, talk to brokers, read about investing. But here's something I'd like to put on everybody's brain. When we look as African Americans, and whatever minority, we're women, we tend to look for mentors that look like us because obviously we believe they can relate to us and they can give us guidance on navigating the things that we're going to go through. And that's true. Get you a mentor that looks like you, can relate to you, but do not close off yourself to mentors who are nothing like you from the outside, or maybe not nothing like you on the inside. One of my greatest business mentors is not an African American. Not for first generation, only different from me. You come from blue collar, high hood. This guy's told we got nothing in common. But he reached out to me in his own uncomfortable ways, and I'll say this, I'll pat myself on the back. I talked about a lot of mistakes I made. I was open to it, and I recognized the signs of somebody who saw something in me, even though they were totally different from me. And I embraced that relationship. And because of that, I learned a lot about business that I couldn't learn because I didn't have any ready-made mentors that looked like me in my family who had done business or been a lawyer and been a rainmaker or anything like that. So don't close off those opportunities. Have your eyes and ears open and peeled and pay attention. Extend yourself. Joe said, get comfortable being uncomfortable. That is so spot on. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, and then you're gonna have to be an entrepreneur person. It's not like how I say, I woke up one day and then I was perfectly making all the things that I ever planned. You might go through pain and shortcomings, a lifestyle change. Embrace that if you want it. I'm talking specifically with respect to entrepreneurship. Embrace it, and you'll come out. You'll come out on top if you stay strong on it.
Okay, due to the limitations on time, we have enough time for one more person. So either 1 minute from guys or one person take the 5. Elijah,
I won't
move to
take.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll chime in and I'll keep it brief. In case anybody else wants to share. I mean, my quick story is, I'm a government employee. Been fortunate enough to be able to, work and climb the ladder at a relatively young age, and gain the type of responsibility, that I have in terms of, being responsible for a a particular federal agency, senator that I work for, and being responsible for its legislative and government relations role. I think just a couple of quick things that I think that has allowed me to progress in my career. Travis hit it in terms of mentors. I've been fortunate to have folks that look like me, but I think my most fulfilling experiences have been with folks who did not look like me. And so I definitely encourage mentors. Humility is a huge thing that I don't think a lot of our folks portray. A strong belief in myself to go along with that humility. And then I would say persistence and an openness and willingness to try new things. So those are just some things that have worked for me, and I want to toss that out to folks for consideration. So I'll end with that.
I'll just jump in.
William,
Oh,
you
go
want
ahead.
to chime in?
Carlos, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to piggyback on what Elijah said in the respect of believing in yourself, because if other individuals believe in you, I would have lost on a great opportunity because I doubted myself. And also, don't burn bridges, unless it's a bridge that you really shouldn't have been crossing in the first place. But I had a college buddy of mine who reached out to me back in 2004 when I tell folks I was going through what I considered a joke moment. I really was kind of second guessing myself whether or not some decisions that I made, whether or not I should have gone to school for music and hadn't gone down the path that I had gone. But he reached out to me. It told me that there was a position at the Chamber of Commerce here that had my name kind of written all over, and I kind of laughed at him. I said, there's no way that, this little black boy from Lammers Point and Park Place in Norfolk, Virginia would ever get hired at the chamber. And he was persistent about me turning in my resume. And all the way up to the last day, I turned my resume in when he finally told me, because he said, you'll live with the rest of your life with a shoulda, coulda, woulda kind of attitude because you would have never known. So being able to learn to take that step, and just to kind of fast forward, I took that step and I made history in my city. I became the first African American to lead the third oldest local chamber of commerce in the country, and at the age of 24 years old. And because of that opportunity, and because I took that leap of faith, and because people had faith in me, it's really moved my career forward. And some of the stuff that I'm doing here now, which I feel like is the most fulfilling position that I have, where I'm able to give back to kids who look just like me, and knowing that I came from the neighborhoods that they came from, and came from a single parent home here in Norfolk. So just taking that leap of faith and giving back, and just believing in yourself.
Well, we only have 1 minute left, so I think that's gonna. I want to thank all of our panelists for just doing an amazing job sharing your experiences. I know this is a 2-hour conversation about being a Black man in America, and we appreciate your stamina. We also appreciate all of you who have tuned in and asked questions. We weren't able to get to all of the questions, but we tried to get to as many of them as we continue to have conversations that engage you in this way. We had over 300 RSVPs for this conversation, so we appreciate your support of the National Urban League Young Professionals in this type of dialogue. We encourage you, if you are not, to think about joining our organization in cities across the country. I am sure that if you put out on social media right now, hashtag I am a man, that you're interested in that, someone will snap you up and give you all the information that you need about getting involved with us. You can follow us at NULYP. You can find us on Facebook at the National Urban League Young Professionals, NULYP.net. We would like to take a brief minute to have a moment. People who prompted this telephone conversation: Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, our young men who are actually killed, and whether it's through police misconduct, through that our one of our past presidents, and we behave and act like a family because we are. Karen S. Williams from the Metro Board of Chicago was actually involved in an accident that resulted from a police chase, and she just lost during this telephone. We and that violence in our communities can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, can cost the lives of some of our best and brightest. And so with that in mind, we would like to take this opportunity to have a moment of silence before we end the call. So again, thank you all for joining. I hope you have a wonderful evening. You will be able to find this taped on YouTube if you would like to share it with us. Stay engaged with us because we will stay much. Good night.